Thank you. So, welcome everyone to today's program. I think we can see by the tremendous attendance at this event that Zoom events are still in demand. And we're so glad that you are all here. So I know so many of you, but for those of you who I do not know, I hope to know you soon, and I hope you know our society more in the future. My name is Tracy Gopal. I'm program chair of the Japan Society of Northern California, and welcome to today's program on Japan's business reinvention, how to lead corporate cultural change. So businesses today must be agile, innovative, and focused on strategic transformation in order to maintain a global edge in today's quick-moving, competitive world. And strategic transformational change requires new systems, processes, and cultural change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we have amazing speakers for you lined up today. First, we will start with Ulrike Schaede, who has done an event about her book on the business reinvention of Japan, how to make sense of the new Japan, earlier for us, maybe a year ago. And the event was so popular, we decided to ask Ulrike back to speak more on this specific topic. And Ulrike Schaede is a professor of Japanese business at the University of California, San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy. If you are not yet familiar with Professor Schaede, I'm sure you will be after this event. Joining Professor Schaede, it is an absolute honor to welcome Mr. Takuya Shimamura from AGC Inc., chairman, member of the board, as well as Mr. Eric Johnson, representative director and CEO of JSR Corporation, as well as president of JSR North American Holdings. So I hope you've got your pens and pencils handy if you still use those. Take good notes, and I hope that you have valuable takeaways for your own organizational transformation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Professor Schaede.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm excited to be here and have two of my great colleagues from Japan here with me today. They have taught me a lot over the years. And so what we're going to try to do today is I'll give a little bit of an introduction of how academics and business scholars think about culture change and also what's going on in Japan by way of a maybe 10 to 13 minute introduction of the pertinent parts of my book. And then I will bring in our two guests for a conversation about how they are actually doing it. And I can promise you already, we'll probably learn a lot from them and their toolkit of how to move their companies from what they used to be, which is big, large industrial installations and chemical companies to, as Tracy just said, agile, nimble, global competitors in the deep tech realm. So let me begin, if it's okay with you, with some PowerPoints. And my first slide, I want to thank the Japan Society of Northern California for doing this event. I'll also point out that this is jointly with the Japan Zoominar at UC San Diego. And I think this is a great example of what we can do when we join forces, so everybody gets to dip in. So welcome, JZ folks. It's great to have you here. So the book, of course, as Tracy just said, is the Business Reinvention of Japan, and it has 10 chapters. And what we want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about Japan's business culture, and in particular about how to manage the reinvention. I will not talk a lot about the strategy, but if you're interested in that, you can either go to my website, which is thejapanologist.com, or read the book. So let me just give you a brief background, right? So the book is about what Japan's leading companies have done in terms of reinventing themselves to compete in the changing global environment. And I argue that Japan still matters because it is the third largest economy in the world after all, and it is an alternative system with different trade-offs between slow and stable change over, fast economic growth. In strategy terms, the book is about how Japan's best companies have repositioned in what I call an aggregate niche strategy, or choose and focus version 2.0, which is about a pivot out of old non-competitive sectors into cutting-edge technologies. And the point today that we want to talk about is the management aspect of it, which is how can this corporate renewal be managed. And we already see it in office design and office layoff and work-life balance discussions. But today we want to talk about what leadership can do. And so some of you may wonder, why do Japanese companies have to reinvent? And the answer is for two reasons. One is Japan lost the previous competitive advantage in mass producing high quality consumer end products to South Korea and then Taiwan and then China, sometime beginning in the late 1990s. So the question is there a way for Japanese companies to profit, not just to succumb to these competitors, but to profit from the rise of these neighbors? And then the second challenge, of course, is the globalization of supply chains and the digital transformation, which is bringing new goals and opportunities for Japan. And so the question is, how can Japan's leading companies benefit from this technological disruption? And the answer, you have to just take my word for it, because I'm not going to go into the depth of this today. The answer is they have to compete as nimble, agile leaders in deep tech technologies. We'll talk about later what that means. And that requires a new processes of breakthrough innovation in the same environment that they used to have that was so strong at incremental innovation. So let me give you the analytical tool that we business scholars like to use. This comes to us from Charles O'Reilly and Michael Tushman, who wrote the book on ambidexterity. And so their model is that there is a certain strategy, right? So what business are we in? How do we compete? And once we have that strategy, to execute it, what is needed is an alignment between four components. One, what are the absolute critical tasks that we need to get done? So if you're an airline, we have to get the airplanes in the air and land on time and so forth. And so if you're a chemical company, that's different. So what are the critical tasks we need to do? What are the kind of people, the mindset, the knowledge, the motivation that we need to get this done? What is the culture, the norms and expectations within the organization that we need to support this? And then what is our HR system? So what are people promoted for? How are they assessed? What's the hierarchy in the organization? And the point is that if there is a fit, if there is an alignment between these four tasks, people, organization, and culture, then this company will be super successful. So that's the model. Okay, so let me take this to Japan. So this is the developmental state, post-World War II Japan's alignment model. You can think of Toyota or Panasonic or something. I didn't want to do that. I want to get my laser pointer. Here we go. So the strategy of the 1960s through 1980s was for Japanese companies to build an export machine with high volume, low cost mass production. The goal was sales growth and market share, and basically pepper the world with consumer end products. And to do that, companies realized that they needed to have operational efficiencies, bring costs down, quality up, and they would do this through Kaizen and constant learning, right? And so this is the old model that we all know from the book by Baglin on Kaisha and so forth. So the people that you need to, if you want to have this aligned, the people that you need to execute the strategy are engineers with operational excellence, high functional expertise, and they just do the Kaizen, the learning, and the quality up. The organization and rewards are about lifetime employment and wage parity. So the definition of fair in that system was equal. Everybody was promoted in lockstep. And really the way to success was to make your boss look good, a little bit like the military maybe. And then the culture needed to execute this developmental state model was one of compliance and obedience, be meticulous, be highly disciplined, work hard long hours, and make no mistakes, right? And so this worked like a charm. There's a huge fit. I mean, if you go to Toyota, if you go to the old Matsushita, even Sony, you see this executed to perfection. And by the way, yes, this is a perfect alignment for incremental innovation and high quality mass production. And also keep in the back of your mind that this is, of course, useful today still, if you want to make windows or big chemicals and so forth. So this is still useful, but it is the developmental state alignment. So let's go to the new strategy of Japan's companies in the 21st century, which is about agility and adaptiveness for global competition and deep tech leadership. All right, so what do we need for that? Well, the critical tasks are about breakthrough innovation, fast sensing and seizing, new business development that is at the forefront of the cutting edge of at the forefront of the tech frontier, and technical excellence. The people and the mindset around this are to be creative, have peripheral vision, a high tolerance for failure, diverse teams and skills, and new perspectives so that there is innovation. Right? The organizational structure will be about cross-functional teams, much looser metrics. Individuals want their own career paths, and the definition of fair switches to equitable or meritocracy. Right? You also want to set incentives for people to experiment. And of course, the culture, and this is where we're headed here, is this new culture for breakthrough innovation is about curiosity and exploration. It is about being tolerant of mistakes. It's being about getting it done, be fast, step out of bounds, make mistakes, right? Break it, fix it. And so this is sort of to be successful, Japanese companies now have to create this new fit in their new businesses. And that's what we want to talk about today, which is how do you kind of manage this change, or if you want to have an ambidextrous organization, how do you manage both at the same time? Right. By the way, Tracy asked me up front, what's corporate culture in Japanese? And I want to tell you that I think bunka is a really bad word for it, because bunka for me connotes heritage and tradition and shrines and temples and sort of generic traits of Wagakuni and Japan. DNA is also bad because DNA cannot be changed. Shafu I don't like because that's like how the winds are blowing, but that doesn't give any agency to the CEO. And karicha is, of course, a katakana word, but that sounds too foreign, right? So I would like to suggest that we think of culture as the yarikata, the way we do things around here. If you don't like yarikata, then kanko might work our practices, right? So that's the sort of the framework. So let me throw one more thing at you before I open, turn to our discussion, and which is, okay, so that's all cool, but how do we change this thing, right? So how do we actually change culture? What are the tools that we can use? And here I want to introduce the framework I use in the book, which is tight loose theory, which is Michelle Gelfand's new framework in business and social psychology. This has nothing to do with Nihonjinron or cultural determinism. It is basically a new international application of 40 years of research in psychology, and that's now being applied to not only behavioral economics, but also organization theory. And so it starts with the definition of culture as a pragmatic shared agreement of the appropriate behavior in a certain situation, right? And so that appropriate behavior changes by setting. Let me tell you a little bit more about that. So for instance, if there's a difference how you behave if you go to the football stadium or Beethoven Symphony. Even we in the United States do this, right? So we behave differently. And if we were to go to a pub, it's very different from a 5-star restaurant, or a 3-star restaurant, I should say. So culture are socially created standards that guide our understanding of what's right and wrong, right? And these norms have 3 dimensions. There is the content, which is the actual prescription. This is how you have to behave. You dress up, or you shut up, or you don't speak out of order, or whatever the prescription is. But then there are 2 other components, and that is consensus and intensity. And that refers to how strongly people agree that these norms are important and how much they're willing to tolerate deviance or not, right? So the content differs by setting, And the consensus and the intensity are what Professor Gelfand talks about as tight or loose. So she and her team studied this across 33 countries. And you guessed it, Japan ranks fairly tight, and the US ranks fairly loose. California would be even looser than the East Coast. And what that means is that there's a high agreement of what is the right behavior and a high willingness to sanction deviance. So everybody who's lived in Japan and has brought the garbage out in the morning knows what this is, right? There are very clear rules how you have to separate your garbage. And if you don't do it right, somebody will come and some obachan will come and tell you that you're getting it all wrong, right? So Japan is a fairly tight setting. So now it gets interesting, right? How do we change a corporate culture in a tight setting, right? So two steps to this logic. One is, if we agree on the definition of culture as a set of norms that guide the appropriate behavior, what's right in a given situation, then that means you can manage that. You can change culture by changing the definition of what is the right behavior in a certain situation. So for instance, think of a meeting, right? Is it okay for a young person to speak out or not? Well, in an old-fashioned Japanese company, no, the young person will always wait until they're called on if they speak at all. However, a CEO could change this, right? So you can change the norms that guide the appropriate behavior. And note also, before I turn my PowerPoints off, that tight loose are not about good or bad. They're good and bad for different things. So loose cultures are quite good at innovation, sort of the break it, fix it of Silicon Valley, let's make a mistake, have the sort of the goldfish memory, don't think about it, move on. Whereas tight can be very good, including, by the way, for managing change, because in a Japanese setting, once everybody is on board and has agreed, it's actually fairly fast rollouts of change in behavior. Okay, so let me stop. I'm talking about too much. I have more stuff. So let me finish. But before I do so, I just wanted to point out that Charles O'Reilly and Masanori Kato and I have actually written a case on AGC. So I just wanted to show you this. It's the Stanford case. So if you're interested in the details of this, this is where you can read up on it, and it exists in Japanese. So let me stop my share here, and bring in my two guests, because what we want to do now is talk a little bit about, okay, so how are you doing this, right? So how are you redefining the norms of what is the right behavior? So if I could get Mr. Shimamura and Johnson on the screen with me, are they there, or are we not sharing this? Maybe we're not. Okay, so there they are. So Shimamura-san, ohayo gozaimasu. Welcome. And there's Johnson-san, ohayo gozaimasu. So AGC, let's start with AGC. And so it's a very old company, founded in 1907, the second son of Iwasaki-san, the Mitsubishi Group, and it's 13 billion in revenue. It's a big old company with lots of installations and lots of chemicals, and glass, of course, a huge thing. So Shimamura-san joined this company in 1980. He spent a lot of his time with the chemicals division, where he led several global turnarounds and a domestic one also. So you were known as the Mr. Turnaround. In 2013, you became the SVP of electronics, and in 2015, you became the CEO. Under your guidance, AGC has undergone what I really think is a reinvention. So thank you for joining us today. We want to hear about AGC. But let me first introduce Eric. So Eric Johnson is the CEO of JSR Corporation, which stands for Japan Synthetic Rubber. But my understanding is you're actually pivoting out of synthetic rubber as we speak. JSR was founded as an offspring of Bridgestone by Ishibashi-san, who wanted to have a synthetic rubber sort of subsidiary, so that because he kind of foresaw that his tires would not be good enough on just natural rubber themselves. So Eric joined after working for Nikon for a while in Sunnyvale, became the CEO of JSR Micro, where he also overlooked, in particular, the development of the photoresist business and the sort of the electronics and digital solutions business. And then he also spearheaded JSR's transition into the life sciences. So now he's in Tokyo. He is the CEO of the whole shebang. And congratulations on taking over this wonderful company. So let me start and ask both of you if you could give us just a little bit of a sense of what your company is and what you've done. So just a short sort of impact statement of what type of company we're dealing with here. So Shimamura-san, could you maybe start us out with that?
Oh, thank you very much, Ulrike-san. It's a very happy and honor today for me. So from my side, so in a sense, a transformation might be something like a destiny for some companies that have a long standing histories like AGC. We have produced sheet glass more than 100 years, and style of the business is not so changing a lot. In a sense, our products are very commoditized product, and about 50% of the sales revenue from these basic materials. We had very hard, severe performance condition from the 2010 to 2014. Performance dramatically down to 1/4. So before my period. Maybe not only for me, a lot of the top executives in Japan, especially a long history company, top always consider how to proceed the transformation from the old style to new style. However, so as you know, the Japanese cultures, a lot of the employees have a very strong loyalty for the company based on the lifetime employment basis. So the employee follow the direction from the boss. So this style is in the very effective in the past, especially to develop the new product or process or cost cutting programs, because they want to contribute for the company. However, recently, a lot of the new players enter the market, like a Chinese producer or other companies can produce it. They are very proud of the low cost comparing the Japanese product. Even we appear the high quality, but for the customer's point of view, they understand the quality. However, they have not neglected the price. So such a condition continues for a long time. So that's why a lot of the Japanese top management want to change. However, so under such a conditions, usually top management say, do something, cost cut. If the people already understand what they should do, already they done. So, but they are confusing how to break through these conditions. And people want to CEO to show the correct direction. What's the direction of the future? And what's the purpose of the company? So once again, Japanese company have to back to the original purpose. What's the meaning? What's the significance of the company's existence? So I focus on the changing the culture. Culture means adapt the changing in the very fluctuate market. And even the top management change, but such a movement have to be continued for a long time. So I want to go back the origin of the funding period. I mentioned to a lot of people what's the purpose of the AGC. In short, if we proceed such innovation invention, from my perspective, so empathy is very important in Japan companies. Once we can succeed to build up the core empathy among the employees, maybe we can do everything and we can make a good team a lot. So Japanese business style move and manage based on the team play. So the point is how to build up the good team. For that, empathy is very important. So my activity in 96 years past, I focus on. So that's why we supporting a lot. For example, installing the DX, AI, material informatic technologies, a lot of the such resources to the working place, and provide 3,000 yen for the growth beside of the usual expense. So like that, how to motivate the people's mind, and today's result already fixed by past activities. Today's our activity make the future. I completed this concept to a lot of the people. And same time, I request the leaders to have to be a good coach. So in US, some leaders ask me, Shimano-san, you mean we have to have a Mickey Mouse ear? So I reply to him, no, the size of the Mickey Mouse is not enough. I prefer the Dumbo. It of Dumbo is good. So we have to concern the growth of the subordinate, initiate, and self activities is very important. If Japanese company remember such a safe, sustainable working style, we can overcome any challenges.
Thank you. So AGC used to stand for Asahi Glass, right? But now you think of it as advanced.
Yeah, one of the change of the name is my strategy to change the mindset from the people.
It still stands for Asahi Glass Company, but you also like to think of it as an advanced materials company.
Yes,
right?
yes. AGC are usually Asahi Glass Company. So, but at the general shareholder meeting, I explained the shareholders, AGC means advanced glass, chemical, and ceramics.
And so you were too modest to point out your great achievements of taking a company that basically grows with GDP, right? Window glass.
Right.
And moved it into a top player, not only in the glass that is what we're all looking at right now, or our cell phones, but automobile glass, advanced glass in the 5G world, and then the chemical division you took into life sciences. So there's a lot of change in terms of pivot going on, even as you're changing the lifetime employees, right? This is of course the great task. How do you bring about these changes? Because the people will not change. You have to change their mindset. You can't change the people, but you can change their mindset. Let's turn to Eric before I come back to you, Shimamura-san, on some of the things that you've done specifically to change the mindset. So Eric, tell us about JSR.
Sure. First, I want to thank everybody for the invitation. It's such an honor to be here with you, Ulrike, and with Shimomura-san, to even share the stage with them is quite the privilege. So thank you. Yeah, as you pointed out, JSR started life as a synthetic rubber company in 1957. And we still have the very large chemical complexes in Yokkaichi and Chiba and Kashima and some other places. It was a quasi-government entity until the late 60s when we privatized. So it really was focused on supporting the Japanese economy. That was the point after the war, to provide the synthetic rubber for the tires, as Ishibashi-san foresaw, and then supporting the automobile industry in Japan. In the late 60s, we privatized. And just around that time, we started to look for new markets as well. And through the 70s, we started to develop a focus on electronic materials, and actually the photoresist market started to come into being about late 70s, actually. And one of the important points here is that that business was started with a joint venture in Europe, right? So from the start, we're now pivoting from a very Japanese large chemical complex to an electronic sector, right? With foreign ownership, even foreign investment. The other thing that was important for that activity was we didn't just send people overseas. We actually invested a lot of capital in these different areas. So we established deep manufacturing capability, first in Europe and then in the late 90s in the United States. At the same time, we started to develop a display business. So the semiconductor and now display. So we've got a pretty robust suite of electronics-oriented businesses. That market, of course, is completely different from commoditized synthetic rubber, right? So you're now starting to see an evolution, not just of capabilities, but also mentality. Right? You talked about culture and the ability to engage outside ideas. That those seeds are already planted at that time. But it's still headquartered in Japan, and one could argue the center of gravity, at least for R&D, was Japan. And then we were successful in engaging markets and attracting good people outside of Japan. But then so I joined 2001. And even at that time, the executive management was encouraging all of us to look for the next growth drivers. And so while we were focused, of course, on I call it our day jobs, on making sure we were executing well for semiconductor, we were also making bets in these other areas just to go explore. And this is something I really enjoyed hearing Shimomura-san, because part of the attitude has to be the ability to explore without penalty, right? To explore with curiosity and to see what happens. So we looked at probably 5 or 6 different types of businesses, along with life sciences. And even life sciences is a pretty generic term. There are lots of different paths that we explored on that. So sitting here looking backwards, it all makes sense. But at the time, it was pretty much organized chaos, trying to figure out what was going to happen next. But I think what's important in that story is that we understood that the life sciences business itself, the center of gravity was not Japan. So now we've got the ability to engage markets and the need to engage technology outside of Japan. And this is the first time where JSR actually executed an inorganic strategy, right? So we're now not just expanding, we're actually bringing in outside people and outside ideas to establish kind of a core part of our business strategy. So that was, when you talk about kind of the background of the company, those are the things that I think are illustrative of the way JSR has progressed.
Well, thank you. That's terrific. So let me maybe go. The global aspect of this is super interesting. But let's stay in Japan for just a little bit. So Shimomura-san, when I saw you in your headquarters at AGC, I noticed that the young staff are very open and talkative with you, and they actually make jokes with you.
Yeah,
if not on.
yeah, it will be
And
popular.
that is a little bit uncommon, I would say. And I don't think that that was the case when you came in first as CEO. So how did you get the young staff excited about being at AGC and challenging you even in public?
Once, as I said, we face a very hard time. And what's the factor of this hard time conditions? Inside factor or outside factor? If we have the inside factor, we have to improve something. And people's viewpoint already looking inside of the company, not outside. So my first task is how to change from inside viewpoint to outside point for the next future's growth. And what's the inside factor, especially in people, among the peoples? I check all layers. Which layers have a problem to break through? And finally, my conclusion, my task is how to encourage young generation. They will be main pillar of the company in next 10 years or 20 years. So that's why from the beginning of young generation, we have to start encouragement. And we support a lot that they can act self-sustaining style. So I try to have many opportunity with them through the face-to-face meeting, drinking, having dinner, and joking in some smoking room. No, smoking is a very secret to my wife. So like
so I understand you did like 130 town hall meetings around
yes.
the country. You were on the road. Basically, you did a road show, right? You have 50,000 employees in this company. So you basically went around the world to meet with everybody.
Now we operate more than 30 countries. And I visited 92 countries already. Unfortunately, 2 countries not yet because of the COVID. But anyway, so I tried to have a face-to-face meeting, not only a top executive of each region. I want to have a face-to-face meeting, a lot of the variety of layers. Top management, middle, and young generation, and worker. So for their understanding that I mean, for example, the company's purpose and our direction, what our role to make a good team, one team. So I thought this is very important. So such a town hall meeting, once visit one site, at least 3 or 4 times face-to-face meeting session, top management, middle, blah, like that. So continuously, this town hall meeting I had, such a rumor already expand worldwide. For example, I visit Russia 2 times. Italian people, colleague, claim me, Shimura-san, why you visit Russia 2 times, but Italy, you didn't come? How come? So I visit like that. So such activities and my behavior, maybe I could show them something psychological safety. So that's why they can free talk to us.
Right. And when the young people speak to you like that, you celebrate them, right? You engage, you make a fun back. They are not punished at all, right? They're celebrated for, yes, they spoke up. So Eric, how about you? I mean, you're coming in as a foreigner into a Japanese setting that has huge installations in Yokkaichi, of all places. What's your MO?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so, of course, from the outside, it looks like a foreign CEO of a Japanese company, right? But the reality is I've been with JSR for 20 years, and every opportunity I get, I try to correct that perception, right? I don't consider myself a foreign CEO. I consider myself a JSR guy. And that's, there's a lot of important truth in that, because my relationships with the people at JSR are deep. And even before I joined JSR, I worked with JSR people. So Koshiba-san and quite a few other people I had very strong relationships with even before I came over. And that was part of the attractiveness to come to JSR. So with that organic kind of growth of the depth of the engagement, when I became CEO, a good part of the company knew me. Obviously, the petrochemical side did not know me so well. But I was able to, as Shimamura-san said, we're smaller, we're about 10,000 people, but I was committed to go and talk to everybody that I could, as much face-to-face as I could. And this was just before COVID, so I was able to tour around quite a bit. And there's a couple pieces to it, though. Even in places where I didn't know a lot of people, I knew somebody. I knew a couple people. And I could casually call on them during these town hall meetings. And once I do that, they're very, we've got a good standing, a good relationship. They could very easily engage with me, and other people could then kind of relax and start to engage a little bit more. So I think that was really helpful. Another piece was, and this I'll fast forward to the restructuring that you alluded to. We just announced the restructuring of the elastomer business, right? Core part of JSR's heritage. And there's a lot of explanation that needs to happen with that. But part of the reality was we didn't do it out of a short-term P&L motivation. It genuinely was considered for the best future of all the employees. So with that integrity and that sincerity, I can honestly and transparently stand in front of people and answer any question that they have. And that is so important, right? To be able to say, please, if you're upset, tell me you're upset. Tell me what you're thinking. And publicly to do that over and over and over and over again. And we had tens of town hall meetings to go through it. But you start to gain the trust that, yeah, this is an environment that free thinking is encouraged and that you want to actually engage. And I do that with small meetings with executives, with large meetings with employees. It's just a behavior that you kind of instill. We were laughing a little bit before we came on. A lot of my colleagues tease me. They say, your favorite Japanese word is honne, right? And so trying to, yeah, please tell me exactly, are you sure? Yeah, tell me exactly what you're thinking. And, you have to be, obviously, you have to be balanced in that approach, but one-on-one is also a very important place to start to understand what people are really trying to get at. And you can start to explore those truths once you understand them. But obviously, if nobody's talking to you, it's impossible. So
every time you change the direction of a company, you pivot out of one business, you open a new one, there will be some people who resist this change. What's your advice on how to deal with the parts of the organization that don't want to change? So that that could be at the general manager level, the butcher level, it could be at a lower level, higher level, but there are always sometimes usually people like to change if they see the thing, but there are always some that don't see it, they don't want to see it, they don't want to change. Change is hard work, or they think otherwise, or they have a different opinion of what the right direction is. How do you talk to them? I mean, what's the, Shimomura-san, do you have any advice on what to do with those that don't want to go along?
Yeah. I think there are some of the confusion between the top management and young generations. Young generation, middle class, especially middle class want to the direction from the boss. And from the boss side, they both want to have an opinion from the middle class, right? So that's why such an imbalance exists in Japan. So one of the most important management style is how to balance both two powers. Only one side activity is not so good. Top down and bottom up. And the cross point is a real conclusion. Based on this conclusion, we have to consider the specific KSF, as Ulrike-san mentioned, explained, and formal organization and people distribution. Usually, a lot of company focus on this package and without how to improve or encourage the culture. So as I said at the beginning, if the company want to change dramatically, all members of the company have to have a same empathy. So that's why culture cultivation is very, very important, I think. And top management consider a lot of the tools. We provide a gong show for the young generation. They can free from any comment from the leaders. They propose their idea. Someone propose. They make the sound speaker by using flat glass like that. So such a, well, it's a very, very amazing and style.
So
but
in the case that we wrote about AGC, we actually lay out a little bit all the different things you've done. It's not one thing you've done, right? You've done the town hall meetings, you took the butcho out, your weekend of brainstorming, the gong show is for young employees that have a business idea, and it's like almost like a pitch event where they can pitch their ideas to senior management. And so at all levels of the organization, you have engage them so that they get excited. Eric, how about you? What are some of the things that JSR has put in place?
Yeah, so I really like the idea of a gong show. I think that would be fun to put in place. Well, I may steal more. So yeah, I think so when you were talking about it, I don't know if it's common vernacular, we call it the clay layer, Nedan, right? The difficulty. And I think part of the truth is people won't always agree, but if you don't explain it so that you have respect for their opinions and you let them know why you're doing it, you can agree to disagree, right? But you can still manage to get a positive and a constructive engagement in the process. And that's part of the communication, right? Just communicate over and over and over again. Why are we doing these things? And one thing is, it sounds easy, but you have to show some success. You know, it's not like it's guaranteed, but once you start to generate a positive result, obviously you start to generate some momentum. And so there has to be clarity of purpose on this stuff. And you know, when we started to engage in the electronic sector, you know, Shimomura-san talks about empathy. Once you get smart people from outside the organization showing how other directions, other processes may be effective, and you see the positive results of that, it generates its own momentum. two things. One, the change starts to stick, right? People, oh, okay, I guess we don't know everything. But you also start to break down the tribalism that's natural to any human organization, right? So you now have kind of a creative energy that allows for people to start to hear and to listen to each other and to be open to change. But at the end of the day, I do genuinely want to hear everybody's ideas, but there has to be somebody who says, I get it, I know, but we're going to go this way because this, in my judgment, is the best way to go. And my experience has been, if you can explain yourself clearly and you're willing to kind of own it, people will support you, right? And so that's been our experience.
So we're going to switch to Q&A soon. So if I see hands coming up, but before let me ask one more question, which I'd like to just get into the round and then we switch to the other folks. So you both run global organizations, right? So AGC has 50,000 employees, of whom maybe half are outside Japan, and JSR has 41 overseas business sites, right? So in your view, in your experience, what is the biggest difference between managing culture change in Japan versus managing culture change in some of the other global sites that you have? Eric is smiling, so let's have Eric go first on this one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is interesting because Japan is different, clearly, right? It's a different approach, and our heritage is Japanese, so that the foundation, the roots are deeper. One of the things that is very clear to me, and you touched on it with the HR systems, the shift from the lifetime employment to a more progressive approach, I think is critically important, but also very difficult. When we just finished our first employee engagement survey globally, right? So we've used them locally to greater or lesser effect. This is the first time that we were able to see across all the different geographies. And you see, especially in the West, you see some subtleties. You see a glaring difference in employee engagement between Japan and these other sites. And I think one of the key issues is the ability for employees to own their own careers. Employees in Japan, they typically sign up to work for a company, right? They have an interest, they have a direction, but they're signing up to work for JSR or AGC. And then the expectation is that the company is going to kind of shepherd them through. And I think what's happened especially in the middle layers, is almost not, I say indifference like it's a negative thing. It's almost like there's no energy put into the question of employee engagement. It almost doesn't make sense, right? It's similar to when I had colleagues who came to the US from Japan. I said, well, how did you feel about that? And like, your words, I understand your words, but the question makes no sense to me, right? There's how I feel about it is completely irrelevant. So shifting that, I think, is important. It's important because I think it makes for a better performing organization. But the population in Japan is shrinking. The younger generations have a different mentality, a different way of engaging. They have different priorities. And it's a competitive space. So if we want to attract the best and the brightest people, we have to have a structure that enables folks to have a big say in their careers and be engaged in that. And I think the knock-on effects are very clear. Conversely, we've got to have a lot of respect for the folks that have already been with the company for quite a while. They've played by the rules. They've done, they've committed their lives to the company. So you have to be respectful for that too. And it's a lot of your questions. I'm writing balance. It takes a balanced approach, especially in Japan.
Shimamura-san, do you have some observations? Is it easier for you in Japan to manage this change in Japan, or is it easier for you to do it outside of Japan?
Well, completely, I can say quite different. Management style, working style quite different. For example, so something activity or only some brochures. In Japan, this type is regular, but this type cannot accept it in Europe like that. So that's why the way of the business style is quite different. More important is we have to respect each region's style. Once we accept their style and how to find the meeting point, and we utilize a good point, and something have to improve like that. So especially the Erickson mentioned, human resource program is quite different. Salary level and job description. Outside Japan, job description is very clear, and salary itself decided based on the job description. But in Japan, the company want the people work over their barriers. So that even we installed the job description working regulation. However, you have to work over your limit areas.
And that makes people at the same time more resistant to certain changes and less resistant to others. So we have some hands. I see Betty. I also saw Yuki earlier, but disappeared. But maybe and Zachary. So let's hear from Betty and Zachary and Yuki, and then see where that takes us. And Tracy, you want to? Sorry, can we add 5 minutes to the time? Is that okay?
Yes, I think I was just going to.
Please, yes.
And we were going to add some
Great.
time and let everybody know that we're, we're glad we're checking our speakers can stay, and usually our events extend over, and we still have 180 participants. So we're going to try and
Well, let's stay on a little bit if that's okay with everybody. Thank you, Shibamura-san and Johnson-san. That's great. I know you have work to do, but this is important. So let's stick here. So Betty, then Zachary, then Yuki, please.
Hi, thank you so much. Wonderful webinar. I was curious how you were supported in each of your companies, because it seems like not just a culture change, not just a business model change, it seems like a transformation, right? Everything, career track, communication, culture, how you work, yarikata, all of that. Did you employ like organizational change management practices or teams, like org design, talent development? What did you use to help you with this in both of your companies? How were you supported?
Do we want to take all the questions and then see how we can bring them together? Would that be okay? Then Zachary would be next. So Betty's question is the tools and the mechanisms and levers that you use. Zachary?
Yeah, hey, Zach here. Thank you so much, guys, for your time. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was kind of wondering kind of like what tools you're planning on leveraging. I mean, clearly there's a societal push for these kinds of innovations and changes inside of your culture, but those demographics are not even across the board. There's like younger generations pushing for different things. There's cultural changes, like your Western branches pushing for more change into your Eastern branches. So I'm kind of wondering, like, how are you leveraging those aspects of your businesses, those kind of engines for cultural change within your company to your benefit?
Great. So we have what HR tools are there. How do you use global energy and global vibes to push your agenda? And then Yuki.
Thank you for both for coming here today. So I have a question on the governance culture. So a shift to rules culture for innovation is possible, but requires to allow the failure, etc. So what do you think that the leaders should do for the peoples to challenge and new things, something like that, depending on the keeping on the governance rules or something like that?
Yeah, so how do you allow break it, fix it culture in the new biz development and exploration businesses while upholding what's good about Kaizen and so forth in the exploitation businesses? So that's an ambidexterity question. So Eric, you want to go first with that, and then Shimamura-san can follow? Would that be
Sure,
okay?
happily. So let me, it's a spectrum of questions. So let me start with the last one. One of the advantages, and I think Shimamura-san's probably seen this as well, competing in the electronics sector, especially in semiconductor, the requirement for disciplined approach to quality systems is intense. It's not just a tagline. You have to deliver statistically equivalent materials over and over and over again. That means there can be no changes. And in fact, it's more severe than anything that had already been understood, even in a Kaizen context, because Kaizen is a big problem for this. If you've got creative energy and so-called improvements, you're causing big problems. So
this is like the Intel rule. There can be no variance whatsoever in that.
Right. That's exactly right. And one of the Intel directors told me a long time ago, he says, we don't know exactly what's going on. We're pushing everything to the limit. All we know is that it worked last time. Don't change anything, right? You can't tolerate any change. But in the same context, we're reinventing ourselves every 2 years. You have to have a creative side to this that enables an innovative mindset. So it's a balanced approach. And on the operational side, strictly discipline. On the R&D side, part of it is simple stuff. People believe you when you spend money. We actually invest in stuff that seems kind of out of our center, right? But I've always said, if someone's passionate and they're curious and they can tell me why, I'll support it, right? And people see that and they see, okay, they're not just talking about, they're actually spending money on it. So that was one thing that came up on this stuff. In terms of the tools, it's things that people are already aware of. Although I will say this employee engagement survey, I think, is going to be a powerful tool for us. There's a top-down kind of solution side of it. We'll make sure we're sensitive to concerns about communication and whatnot. But the real juice is enabling local managers with resources and with support to be very specific about the feedback that they're getting and to make 2 or 3 high priority changes within that context. And that again is, I mean, it'll move the ball, but it also communicates that we're not just taking surveys here. So those are a couple of thoughts that I had.
Yeah, and Shimamura-san, over to you. What are your reactions?
Okay, so first questions. So we didn't use the consultant support. We strive to build up our original style, but of course we have a lot of the interviews outside. Gong Show, we heard, Gong Show was held in Uniqlo.
Uniqlo. Wow.
First retraining.
Yeah.
So why they at the Gong Show? Because they had to dispatch some guys to outside branches, and they select the very capable, talented people. However, the result is not so good. So Yanai-san considered why such a good, talented people are dispatched, but the result is not so good. So that's why to find out such a suitable people for the outside of Japan, he started the Gong Show like that. So I hear such ideas and installing AGCs, modifying our original style. And so such a style is acceptable for AGC's young generation. And 3 years later, young generation themselves had a camp to discuss corporate culture. Wow, we surprised. The people's generations within 10 years from joining AGC. But such a young generation already started discuss the corporate culture. And we have to invite it and join the workshop and discuss together like that. So once we put some of the idea, the hint or opportunities, after that, a young generation themselves promote next event or something. So such a style is very, very important, I think. And secondly, in terms of the governance, as I said, Erickson also said, the quite different lifestyle overseas. So that's why we put the very basic code of conduct that can be kept among every countries. And on top of these basic regulations, we add some of the regional-wise regulations.
Great. Yeah. So thank you very much. So what I hear you say is that, first of all, at one level, you're doing everything that the sort of the scholars have described. Maybe they just watched you and learned from how you're doing it. But you set the direction, you create involvement, you bring in the younger folks and let them have ideas, you make the gong show and the town hall meetings. Then you showcase good ideas and the right behaviors, to celebrate breakthrough behaviors, and young people make a joke, that is immediately amplified and celebrated. And then you change the HR system, allow maybe for more individualized career path and more meritocracy. And overall, what I hear you say is that what you're trying to do, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I heard you say today is you both of you have set out to talk to people a lot, talk to people, and be respectful when they respect their diverging opinions. That's fine. Let's have diverging opinions. That's healthy, right? Let's talk about it. Let's not agree, and in the process make the organization a little bit flatter, maybe. So remove some of the hierarchies where the young people don't dare to speak out and that sort of thing. So that's what I've heard you say, and I want to thank you for these great insights. I think time is up. I want to bring Tracy in and see whether she or Akiyama-san maybe want to have a final word on this and want to close this up, maybe, Akiyama-san.
Yeah, thank you, Ulrike Sensei. I'm Takahide Akiyama of the Japan Society of Northern California. Thank you all for participating in today's wonderful event. I'm very pleased to see so many of you have participated. And I think this shows a level of interest in how Japanese large companies have been doing in this very competitive global business. Thank you very much, Professor Schaede, Mr. Shimamura, and Mr. Johnson, for your very interesting and engaging presentations and conversation. Today, I'm very fortunate to be able to hear directly from a very top executive of the two significant Japanese companies, AGC and JSR. I'd like to thank Mr. Shimamura and Eric for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share with us your story about how each of you has led your company to change the corporate culture and mindset. This is something that we cannot usually hear elsewhere. So very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Also, Tracy, thank you also for kicking off this event by introducing Professor Schaede and the event. This event, as Ulrike-san mentioned earlier, is co-sponsored by Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology at US San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy, where the Professor Schaede is the director. And I'd like to thank you and the forum as well. As you probably know, Japan Society in Northern California is 116-year-old this year. We are committed to advance understanding and friendship between the US and Japan. And we continue to provide interesting and meaningful events throughout a year. Our activities range from art and culture and history, foreign relations and business, and technology innovation. And these activities and events have been made possible with generous support from many corporate sponsors as well as individuals, particularly MUFG Union Bank, and as a strategic partner, ANA and Dodge & Cox and Japan Airlines, Megagon Labs, United Airlines as our Yokozuna members. Thank you very much. And also there are many corporate member supporters that I am sorry I cannot mention each of the names at this time. I would also like to thank individuals who made donations to this event and the society. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you very much. We have an interesting event lined up later in this month and the next few months. This coming Thursday, the day after tomorrow, we will, that's September 23rd or the 24th in Japan, we will have a special event about bunraku, Ningyo Joruri, a very traditional Japanese art, live from Puppetry Theater in Tokushima City in Shikoku, the most active bunraku place in Japan. And next Monday, September the 7th or 28th in Japan, we'll be hearing an interesting story of Adobe, a leading Silicon Valley company. I'm sure you're all familiar with their products such as Acrobat Reader or Photoshop and the PDF. I will be hearing their story, how it is leading their digitization and create cloud and so on. So we have many more coming in October. Please look for your email box about the upcoming events. We will shortly be sending an event survey. Please take a moment to respond. It is really short, simple survey. So please let us know your opinion. So before I close, very much like to thank again for Mr. Shimamura and Eric and Ulrike Sensei, allowing us to extend additional time to answer the interesting questions. So with that, I would like to close today's event. And thank you very much again, everyone, Mr. Shimamura, and Mr. Johnson, and Professor Schaede, and everyone. Have a wonderful day or wonderful evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much.